Every community across the country wants the same things. At the very base level, they want the roads and streets to be safe, the water to flow, the rubbish to be removed, and for people to be able to flourish. And every 3 years, we, the voters, get to choose who we feel will best deliver on those, as well as our other priorities for our communities in the local body elections. But we have a problem this year. We're standing amidst a perfect storm of problems where the country feels like it's in a slump. We're seeing issues like rising crime, a mass migration exodus, a government stomping down on the poor, Maori, woman. And that creates a perfect window of opportunity for people and groups to manipulate those feelings and manipulate voters. This election, we're facing a coordinated effort to create and sell Astroturfs to communities, to try and trick communities all over the motu into believing the spin of these groups should be the dominant narrative and guiding light for how voters should vote this election. They're groups driven by disinformation. They have a dark underbelly that includes casual racism, homophobia, misogyny, and a visceral hatred of former Prime Minister Dame Jacinda Ardern. They package it all up and put on a bow of respectability to try and sell their ideologies to voters, trying to indoctrinate them along the way to see the world from a far-right lens. This is what happens when Astroturfs go local. This is fabricated consent.
I think it is very good to target councils to build profile and presence so that we can then take it forward into central government, because if we get the numbers, we can start to exert more control.
There's already a number of local elected members involved with links to groups like Voices for Freedom, New Zealand First, Hobson's Pledge, New Zealand Loyal. In their current roles, they've worked to highlight the issues they consider important, not issues and decisions that necessarily create stronger, better communities. They have a habit of voting against climate change mitigation, transport safety initiatives, Maori rights and representation. They focus on division, they drive disinformation. Their supporters are behind the rise in reports of violent action towards council staff all over the country. And on October 11, they want more seats at the decision-making table, but maybe not for the reasons that they tell you.
It does go back to the World Economic Forum, where there is interconnectedness of these groups, and the conspiracy is real.
So today we're going to break down a few things, like what an AstroTurf group is, and how it fits within an Aotearoa New Zealand local government context, how these groups are all connected in some way, and the kind of ways that they spread disinformation to try and entice your standard centrist voters who just want roads and pipes to be taken care of. Then we're going to take a look at exactly the impact that they can actually have in the real world by talking to people who have been involved, who have been impacted by them. And then finally, we're going to take a look at exactly how we go about making sure that these people don't get a stranglehold on local governance, because the impacts of that could be really wide-reaching and detrimental to large chunks of the population. But the first place that we need to start is to ask ourselves, what exactly is astroturfing? Well, astroturf groups are set up to look like a grassroots movement, but like astroturf, it's fake grass. They tend to be funded by political, corporate, or ideological interests. Some claim that they need financial help to reach their goals, and often they have a lot of crossover with each other because they use a lot of the same people to do the same jobs and source their information from the same places. It's like political incest. Think of it like Game of Thrones, but the dragons are people like this narcissist from Tauranga whose kids refused to speak to her and who once tried to kidnap her own grandchild. But more on that later. On a national scale, groups like the Free Speech Union, the Taxpayers Union, Groundswell, Hobson's Pledge and the Sensible Sentencing Trust are all well-known AstroTurf groups which have links to one group, the Campaign Company, run by Jordan Williams, the poster child of the Atlas Network, a think tank of right-wing think tanks. They've been behind campaigns like the Anti-Three Waters Roadshow with Groundswell, the We Belong Aotearoa campaign with Hobson's Pledge, the Save Our Stores campaign to fight against smoke-free laws funded by major tobacco companies, the Civic Pulse campaign aimed at local government members in 2024, and much, much more. And yes, the FSU and TPU will be involved this year. There's links with the NZCPR, who are suing Hutt City Council, who took offence to one of their campaigns, personal connections between elected members and the board executives, and the Taxpayers Union now running a data harvesting petition campaign which is being shared exponentially by these local groups to cap rates after running a campaign which led to water infrastructure costs being added back to council books and is a major driver for the rates increases these groups use as pain points to convince others to vote for them. And of course there's Groundswell, who will be running candidates in the South Island, but won't be publicly backing their campaigns, just offering support and resources to get their candidates elected. Sound familiar?
They get you into groups and then they try and direct you, and the easiest way is to become ungovernable. Don't do what they ask to do.
And now Voices for Freedom have had 3 years to plan their next steps, and others within the broad freedom community have seen their success, which has led to the rise of a range of groups broadly wanting the same things, but unable to really define what they are beyond slogans, crying about potholes, water, and anything Māori, seemingly pushing in the same direction while banging heads against each other.
All of them. Their main message is rates are too high, we want zero rates, get rid of the current council. So it's a negative campaign across all these groups. There are no solutions or no policies behind that.
This is the website concernedratepayers.nz. It uses stock photos and a simple design to say council spending is crazy out of control. And at the moment, it focuses primarily on the lower North Island and Canterbury. They want concerned voters to be kept, quote unquote, informed this election, which sounds admirable. The site was set up by this guy, Dean Harris, the Wellington Regional Voices for Freedom coordinator. He's an associate of Glenn Inwood. They both went to the Anti-Trans Inflection Point event in Wellington. Inwood is the man behind New Zealand First culture war campaigns and helped with Voices for Freedom linked plans called Refreshing Local Democracy to teach candidates about how councils work. Harris, coincidentally, is also part of this group, We Love Kapiti, a small group of candidates vying for votes in October. They have links to this Kapiti community page, and they're also the only group of candidates Concerned Ratepayers NZ is currently endorsing. I know, I'm shocked too. But don't worry if you're not in Kapiti. He has some handy links if you're in other areas, like his recommended websites. 3 far-right AstroTurf groups, one with links directly to Inwood. He owned the server that hosted and is a regular contributor to Better Wellington, a site which has also endorsed these candidates. His 3 sites of interest all share a common theme. They only platform or enable right-wing talking points, Better Wellington being a prime example of that. There's NZCPR, which was set up by former ACT MP Muriel Newman. They're known for questioning climate change, calling for the end of the Waitangi Tribunal tyranny, spreading anti-Māori rhetoric, and have platformed the self-described Trump of Northland, Kaipara Mayor Craig Jepson, who wrote an op-ed about getting rid of Māori wards sometime after returning from the illegal parliamentary siege, but before demanding the Prime Minister never ever enter any worldwide pandemic response agreement ever, along with about 24 other local elected officials. And the New Zealand Initiative is another of those right-wing think tanks that recently told News Talk ZB that we should be selling our assets, and has also been making rumblings about the need to refresh our democracy. And if you are in other parts of the lower North Island or Canterbury and want to get involved, well, our man Dean has some suggestions as well. All 6 of his suggestions are groups run by Voices for Freedom local coordinators. Not that they'll tell you that, and they're all involved in local resident and ratepayer groups that they've set up, with Palmerston North and Whanganui predating Harris's group, and the others following after Harris showed them how he set up his group, which is why the naming conventions are different. In Canterbury, the Facebook page for Concerned Ratepayers has one video about the evils of fluoride and a bunch of "hey, come meet us at the market" posts. They only follow one quote-unquote artist, Reality Check Radio, and the pages they follow include the anti-rainbow hate group Let Kids Be Kids, the science disinformation groups NZDSOS and Fluoride Free NZ, pseudo law group Common Law Assent, the conspiracy peddling South Island Independence Movement, New Zealand First, Matt King Northland, Better Wellington, Council Watch NZ, and Mike Hosking Breakfast, who their spokesperson Diane is actually a regular caller to and encourages others within these groups to do the same through their Telegram channels, making comments like, "I'm not a Pākehā, I'm a New Zealander," And it's New Zealand, not Aotearoa. And there's a range of local election candidates they follow. Some have been known to push far-right content, like Melbourne local board member and Wellington parliamentary siege attendee Sian Nu'u, but not everyone on their list is like this or shares alt-right ideologies. Christchurch mayoral candidate Sarah Templeton, for example, is progressive and a strong advocate against gendered attacks on politicians, having been instrumental in the takedown of young National members in 2022 who were sending her and other female politicians threatening and harmful messaging. Messaging which has been increasing on her social media pages from the time Concerned Ratepayers Canterbury started following her campaign.
The odd kind of comment that's not a specific threat. There was that whole, Salem, knew how to deal with women like her. Those kind of things that are disconcerting. One recent one said, "We know who you really are. You'll be found out soon and we're going to make it all public." That kind of, I don't know what that means.
These resident and ratepayer groups are being used as a Trojan horse to push specific perspectives built around hot-button issues. We can track their growth and spread and see common messaging, altered slightly to help them assimilate into local communities before building a base of followers who think of them as a legitimate concern group. They're like the Borg, and your home's unique area will adapt to service their needs. In the 21st century, though, assimilation isn't done at the end of a gun or under the direct boot of colonization. It's achieved through media and algorithms. These tools can create a lot of influence, and in the past, some of the actions of these groups have led to really personal, hurtful outcomes for people, fed on disinformation to groups susceptible to conspiratorial thinking, and without the skill set to critically approach media content.
One of these groups, you may remember 2 years ago, started a rumour about a sex tape that I apparently had out in the sphere. That was completely untrue, and we told journalists that it didn't exist. But that particular group had so much, for whatever reason, it gained legs. And I'm still trying to bat off that rumour today. It had no impact on policy, because I've managed to pass through pretty much everything I wanted, but it's impacted me, which is probably what they wanted, is for me not to run for mayor again. So progressive candidates, especially if you're mayor or deputy mayor, have that as a very real danger.
They have a dedicated mission to flood the zone, as it were, around specific hot-button issues, specifically increasing council costs and questioning transparency within councils, taking advantage of areas the general public aren't overly aware of to push their ideologies. They pull resources and access content from a small range of sources, like challenging councils. Content from challenging councils shows up a lot on the pages run by those Voices for Freedom coordinators. It's also appeared in lists by researchers looking into pseudo law groups around the country. This is Mark Quinn, founder of Challenging Councils. He's anti-vaccine and shared beliefs online in chemtrails, shared content from people like Liz Gunn and Brian Tamaki, and posted pseudo-law hot takes on the Challenging Council pages.
You're a real living man. You're the executor of the estate of the top hat, or the capitalisation, the persona of your living man.
There has never been a single case of pseudo-law being successfully argued anywhere in the world, but this page is used by a lot of these astroturfing groups to sound informed, authoritative, and push their narrative perspective. All of these groups work on a combination of authoritative-sounding mumbo-jumbo, targeting ratepayer pain points and offering a simple alternative to voters, just as long as they continue to not look too deep into what's being offered. And it's happening almost all over the mutu. This page in the Waipa, for example, posts an inordinate amount of complaints about rates and water costs. It questions the legal validity of council decisions, and its most emotive posts are designed to target the fact that people don't spend a lot of time getting to know how councils work, and sound semi-authoritative, which makes the public consider questions then from the perspective of people like group member and Te Awamutu Kihikahi community board member Sally Whitaker, whose extreme beliefs have driven her children away from her, and her personal content shows as, well, It's full of just about every rabbit hole conspiracy it's possible to find. But on this page, she presents as reasonable. The same group that runs that Waipa page also runs the Te Awamutu Residents and Ratepayers Association page, where they are proudly promoting this document, written by Hamilton City Councillor Andrew Bidder, where he talks people through in just 18 pages, which include cartoons from cartoonists fired for being racist, how they can overwhelm councils at elections by flooding the zone, so when they're elected, they can refuse to do their job.
So if we can start to get some serious change in the way councils operate, then that gives us a foothold to take on central government and really work towards saving the country.
These groups will share sources which only back up their perspectives and personal reckons and frame it as verified, authentic and unbiased, like this content from this Tauranga Council Watch page. This page is run by Susie Edmonds, who ran in the Tauranga election last year. She's anti-rainbow community and anti-trans, supported the parliamentary siege, claimed that she had a vaccine exemption from Pfizer that Ashley Bloomfield himself ignored, seemingly lied about dying from dementia, may have scammed the government COVID business payments, ran out on tens of thousands of business debts, alienated family and scared one former co-worker so much, she said talking about her felt like being dragged back to hell by Satan himself. She's also shown up on the Waipa and other ratepayer pages, being presented as a balanced voice of reason, because she also runs her own local council watch group page, which over the years has changed faces more than the last of the Time Lords, including when she repurposed it to make herself look more popular as a candidate in the last election. A common theme throughout all of these groups is that the users sit within a bubble of far-right media, fueled by algorithms that back up their views and cheered on by other people who either refuse to see the issues this causes or don't see them as issues at all, aided in a way by the shrinking local media coverage that we deal with, which allows these more extreme ecosystems to thrive without the laws that govern media accuracy in content coverage.
When you have two government partners communicating directly to these groups and saying horrific things, it's empowering people.
Cam's been heavily engaged in the politics of Tauranga, which is, I think, one of the places that's been most failed by local government in recent years.
When the alt-right parties are sharing the views of a woman who once compared trans people to castrated dogs and told a teenager his mother was a sex worker before threatening to burn herself alive in their driveway, that's the sign of a toxic echo chamber. One being presented as normal and problem-free to voters, and as incestuous as all these seem to people on the outside, like any family there are cracks.
So we've got so many groups from Groundswell, Voices for Freedom, all related to opposing aspects of World Economic Forum policy, but not necessarily being aware of the big picture and how it's affecting other people.
In New Plymouth, there's multiple freedom-connected ratepayer groups which don't get on with each other. Around the Northland councils, there's multiple individuals within alt-right groups competing for dominance in this year's elections. In Hamilton, a current member of the executive of the Residents and Ratepayers Group, an organisation that was, until recently, run by a multiple convicted serious fraud offender and issuing pseudo-law court summons to the head of the police in the High Court, wanted me to make sure I pointed out that he considers Andrew Bidder, the head of Better Hamilton and Better Waipa tickets, as deranged. That man, by the way, is running for the mayoralty of Hamilton on a platform of introducing tariffs and calling himself a sovereign citizen, and he thinks Bidder is too extreme.
I will be promoting the introduction of municipal tariffs.
And while there is some crossover in the memberships of Voices for Freedom and pseudo-law group challenging councils, Voices for Freedom has reportedly discouraged members from being involved with the group, which has led to some, well, let's just call it friction. On the whole though, New Zealanders keep showing that they don't want to vote for extremists, especially ones that are so clearly susceptible to pseudo-law beliefs and disinformation trying to manipulate them, which is why the outreach approach in the lead up to this election has generally been more subtle. For many group members, they're using online forums to connect with voters in a way which doesn't present a snarling face of drooling madness, but a calm hand outreached in kindness. But in some places, candidates are finding disinformation about them being spread across these pages en masse.
one guy who did a big spam across community groups. So the day I announced that I was standing for mayor, I went into maybe 15 to 20 different community Facebook pages that he'd joined over the years, and just put the same post with misinformation about me up on all of them.
On community pages all over the country, hidden amongst questions like whose dog is this or did anyone hear the helicopter, you'll find posts like this, seemingly innocuous posts with reasonable sounding content and framing. This is actually part of the zone flooding strategy. There are going to be some viewers out there who agree with the content, and there'll be other viewers out there who disagree with the content or the framing. And in the middle of it all is going to be a whole bunch of undecided voters or people who aren't all really that interested in what's going on. When you push back on these groups though, they tend to come in as a tag team, creating strawman arguments to vilify opponents. They'll twist from arguing about costs to arguing about transparency. They'll go from inquisitive to nasty. They want to look like they're clearly passionate about those hot button issues and offering a solution. And they're not trying to convince the person that they're pushing back against. They're trying to convince other people watching the interaction who aren't going to go digging to find out that the lady so concerned about city debt was actually one of the people who went to a meeting run by pseudo law believers who issued execution writs to sitting councillors over fears of a 15-minute city conspiracy. That the candidate that they're clearly pushing was also part of that group, along with your local MP, which is the extreme end of outcomes. But the tactics crop up over and over. These people are militant keyboard warriors for the freedom cause.
Yes, it is really hard at the moment, but the second we lose representation, it impacts democracy. So we have to really acknowledge that it is a really horrible, awful, in some ways violent time in politics, in local body and at Parliament. Even more reason to put ourselves forward. But people are finding it very hard and not wanting to do that. I completely understand. So I think a lot of work has to be done about that, and I'm actually quite excited about that.
And while Facebook is the public-facing platform of choice because of its high usage levels and older regular use demographic, Telegram is where these groups congregate online in relative privacy. Telegram is an encrypted social platform used by a large number of people who have fallen for disinformation and alt-right ideologies. It's often used to strategize before presenting groups and individuals to the public as sanitized for public consumption, like Whangarei's Voices for Freedom group, who hope locals will be eating crow.
Firstly, congratulations on coming along to the first meeting. That's the first step we need to all take. The next point I'd like to make is that we can argue until the cows come home and debate and discuss all the different problems. We already know most of the key problems, the key issues that councils are getting wrong. What we actually need to spend more time and energy on is growing the number of people that are aware of the issue and are connecting the problem and the pain with our solution.
In early June 2025, the group started floating a plan on Telegram for what they called Crow, the concerned ratepayers of Whangarei. Within a week, it was popping up on local community pages, with no mention to links to Voices for Freedom, and being shared by candidates like Dave Baldwin and John Twyman, both Freedom community members of the area who have also been sharing content to the Pseudo Law Challenging Councils page. The group has even gone so far as to create their own community page, which pushes funded content by Voices for Freedom and NZCPR's own local Astroturf group, Democracy Northland. They've hosted recent meetings with Voices for Freedom's Tane Webster on how to grow crow, implying a form of centralised organisation in setting up these groups, and with NZCPR's Frank Newman on how they will be attempting to influence voters.
It's just bloody complicated, to understand. So you've got to take it on faith because you can't exactly just check these things.
Telegram is where these sort of conversations often start, and is often more extreme and pointed than what's on their Facebook pages. Like the Nuremberg 2.0 Telegram channel New Zealand First MP Tanya Unkovic allegedly joined, which called for the execution of MPs involved in vaccine mandates and lockdowns. You'll also find on here a channel for Council Watch New Zealand. Council Watch like to claim that they're not alt-right. How can they be when all they want is lower rates and being against fluoridated water supplies? And their Facebook page almost makes that look accurate, until you see the post calling the use of Te Reo Māori names in Invercargill woke. Open racism and race baiting is one of the key elements which defines a range of far-right political leanings, according to the Royal Commission report into the Christchurch massacre. That report, and the most recent public NZSIS report into threat assessments for the country, also notes that screeds of academic research into offline extremist harm correlates with online ecosystems sharing harmful content that vilifies groups based on a range of identifiers like ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, and how empathetic people are, or woke, as these groups like to say, and can lead to identity-based extremism incidents. And Council Watch New Zealand meet these defining criteria for far-right ideological beliefs and content based on identity extremism on their Telegram channel. They vilify any form of co-governance, including the formalised relationship surrounding the Waitakere Rangers, which is mandated under law from 2008. They shared content from racist right-wing media creators like The Anglo-Saxon, criticised the gifted use of Māori place names and claimed that Māori wards are undemocratic and a farce. On top of that, they cheer on people like Nobby Clark, the outgoing mayor from Invercargill, who proudly supported the Stop Co-Governance tour, claimed he was tired of, quote, Maori being rammed down his throat, end quote, and of course using the N-word on TV. They celebrated the ending of funding from the current government on groups fighting disinformation and demand voters remove any elected officials who support Māori initiatives, especially around representation, public transport or green initiatives. They use woke as an insult aimed at progressive politicians and viewpoints and vilify specific politicians that they feel embody those qualities.
And it's exactly the same message, kind of like that I'm a misandrist and I hate men, and they say horrific things about trans people, and it's very much all that red pill type content. Andrew Tate, and it's I look at it. It gets deleted immediately, but I look at it and go, are these people for real? Is this what? And you would know more than me. I've only seen the surface level of these comments. Some of them post machine guns on my Instagram page. Some have sent death threats, and one said he wanted to drag me down the street behind his truck. Do these people exist? And I'm trying to look at them and go, well, maybe it's a Russian bot, or maybe it is a real person. And I don't know that yet, but the thought of them possibly being real is horrifying.
They promote the work of Dean Harris, the I Love Kapiti Wellington Regional Voices for Freedom coordinator at Reality Check Radio, the New Zealand initiative, former New Zealand First candidate Erica Harvey, who shares content on her socials from some of the country's most well-known toxic tweeters and disinformation spreaders, and a taxpayer union AstroTurf group, the Auckland Ratepayers Alliance. So to answer Tori's question, yeah, some of them are real, and some of them already hold elected positions. In this letter to the Prime Minister, Foreign Affairs Minister and then Minister of Health, taken from a Voices for Freedom data storage space, demanding that the government ignore any future pandemic plans or mitigations that cooperate with overseas organisations like the United Nations or the WHO, the letter is signed off by Council Watch New Zealand, with a list of local government representative members. Self-described Trump of Northland outgoing Kaipara Mayor Craig Jepson, Southland District Council's Jaspreet Boparai, South Waikato's Marie Farrell, Clutha's Brett Mackey, Western Bay of Plenty's Andy Witches and Tracy Coxhead, Rotorua Lake's Robert Lee, Taupō's Duncan Campbell, Manawatu's Fiona Underwood and Steve Bielski, Dunedin's Lee Vandervee, Auckland Council's Ken Turner, Fiona McCabe and John McIntyre from the Waihopi Toitoi Community Board, Chris Herod, Dave Dyack, Katie Allen, Tracy Kennedy and Karen Moore from the Oreti Community Board, Gil Booth from the Teviot Valley Community Board, Tane Webster from Bell Block Community Board, Sally Whitaker and Kane Titchener from the Te Awamutu Kihikihi Community Board, Sarah Burton from Waipuna Hillswell Hornby Community Board, Ivan Campbell from Rangiora Ashley Community Board, Tim Bartel from the Kaiapoi Tuahiwi Community Board, and Caroline Holman from the Mercury Bay Community Board all co-signed this letter from Challenging Councils New Zealand. These announcements from Winston Peters and Simeon Brown that before the signing of the non-binding WHO Treaty on Pandemic Cooperation, the document would need to go through a national interest test, making New Zealand one of the few countries in the world to not agree to sign. This press release from the Beehive was designed to speak directly to those local government members in particular and to ease the concerns of wider freedom groups while being vague enough to avoid alarming the wider public, because New Zealand First has links to a number of these freedom groups. And through all of this, these individuals and groups continue to push lines about debt and, ironically, transparency. Because right now, every council in the country is facing a choice: rates increases or ageing infrastructure wind-downs. For years, councils have struggled to find a balance between keeping rates affordable and keeping infrastructure working, and the prevalence of right-wing conservatism in local councils has led to years of pushing out work that needed to be done on roads, water, sewage, paths, parks, and so much more, with different councils having varying degrees of work needing to be done. There are a lot of factors that drive up those core business costs, which take up to 95% of council budgets already, like the long tail of inflation and supply chain disruption from COVID on infrastructure builds, the remote nature of the country for infrastructure delivery, the return of Three Waters infrastructure into council finances with no alternative at the time, which was a change driven by these groups who vilified Māori in the management structure of co-governance that are now demanding no inter-council cooperation on the topic at all and calling for rates caps. And councils know who is to blame, as outgoing Clutha Mayor Brian Cadogan told Groundswell's Brett McKenzie directly.
I've certainly got a few questions, Bryce. So just firstly, you were saying water, roads, infrastructure. Why don't you stick to it? This council is sticking to it. Do you know what the rate rise would be if we excluded water, roads and infrastructure?
What would the rate increase be? If you're only sticking to those, I have no idea. Sorry.
If we excluded water, roads and infrastructure, the rate increase will be somewhere around 3%. Now, interestingly, and it's a question I really want to
clarify that. If you
exclude the Three Waters, the Roding and Mount Kiwi.
If you exclude them.
From the rate rise. We're looking at urban of about 26 in Milton and the likes, which is really weighing heavily on us as a council. And you said, well, why don't you just stick to water, roads and infrastructure? Water, roads and infrastructure is 21 of the 24, or about 26. We are only spending a fraction of it. But the next question I ask you is, are you aware that in July this year, this council would have had $41 million in the bank, no indebtedness, no future litigious or financial burden from the Three Waters, and the 41 million would have generated over $2 million in interest that we could have funded the likes of what you're saying. We have the system, and yet I think it would be fair to say that there was no institution anywhere in New Zealand that worked to stop that more than Groundswell.
Oh, no, I disagree with that.
Stop Three Waters was definitely your cornerstone campaign. So this is the predicament that council is faced with. So the question I ask no, it is a point. I do have a question. So consequently, how do you think you can come here and tell us when the predicament we've been placed in? I stood and talked to you at Philip Lang House 4 years ago and pleaded with you that if this happened, that if we lost the Three Waters reforms, we were going to bankrupt the people we love and the communities we serve. Here we are. And yet you come and tell us that it's happening.
Oh, no, I'm not telling you anything. I'm here to put it.
Which means the people being promoted and supported by the astroturfing groups in play this local election, who are using these cost increase and public's lack of engagement to scare voters, are the ones who caused much of the issues that they are currently manipulating to get more far-right elected members on councils all over the country. On top of that, there's the personal impact of dealing with these groups as a politician.
Yeah, so it was really interesting. There was some accounts that had clearly been around for a wee while but not been particularly active, and a couple that sort of doubled up on the same name and were activated around the same time but had different profile pictures. And so there was probably, I guess maybe 10 or 11 accounts just over a period of 2 weeks that were clearly not real people who were starting to spout off fake information, mostly about me. And that type of information was around my voting record or where I might have been. A couple of them said, I bumped into her and she said such and such, but she said to keep it quiet because there was an election coming. And it would be something that I never would have said. Like we're planning to lock everyone down in their rooms or stop all the cars from the central city. Those kind of things that feeds into a narrative about me being progressive and stuff.
So how do we stop these groups of pseudo-lawyers, disinformation peddlers, the hard-right groups, and the candidates that they support? Well, there is one really obvious answer here.
I think it's crucial that people get out and vote, and that there's really good information available about people. So this time we've been told that not only do we get the 150 words in the booklet, because you're only allowed 150, which is nothing, but also Council's going to be filming 90-second videos with set questions for everyone. So people will be able to get a sense of who people are, as well as that, which is really good. I know last election that it was really difficult for people, and I know I talked to people who didn't vote because they were too scared of voting for the wrong person, because that they knew that there were candidates out there who that they would have concerns about, and they didn't know who they were. So there were people who didn't vote because of that. So finding ways to get good information out there is going to be really important.
It's just honestly so important, and for local body, on average, it's about 42% turnout, and that's not great. And you can honestly believe me when I say that 42% will now be built or filled with these people who are anti-Māori, anti-trans, want zero rates, and that's not going to deliver an inclusive and protective society, and it certainly won't take our city forward. So voter turnout is probably the most important thing, because I know deep in my heart and deep in the data of this electorate is we're a progressive, caring city. We are a green city. The Green Party rates the highest. But those same people need to get out and vote in local body, because it's just as impactful as it is with Parliament.
The system we have now isn't fit for purpose. A postal ballot system when snail mail infrastructure is being removed is difficult to justify. And when we get our voting forms, they often end up in the "I'll do it later" pile until it's too late. We need to buck that trend this year and make sure we encourage everyone else to vote as well. The other thing we can do is research and call out these issues when they crop up. It helps keep other voters informed as to what candidates and the groups pushing them really believe. On community pages, they try and present calm and reasonable avatars. I saw one in that Waipa page today from a candidate who looks reasonable, sounds professional, but she's anti-trans, anti-vaccination, and a parliamentary siege refugee. And the public don't see that, so can't judge if she's the right choice to represent them. We need to point out where that happens and when it's happening. Push back on content from groups clearly pushing pseudo-law, hard-right groups with a clear bias or disinformation, local right-wing media outlets, and check any content from resident and ratepayer groups. It's not every ratepayer group in the country, but it could be any ratepayer group. But a quick look to see if they're pushing content from some of the groups we looked at here is a really good indicator. And if you run or moderate a local community page, keep an eye out for content from groups using disinformation-based sources. Remember, you'll never convince the members of these groups directly, and often they'll team up and try to discredit what you're saying in some way. Think of them as velociraptors hunting, but they're not the audience that you're looking for. And finally, we all need to remember that everyone has a right to vote for whomever they please, but voters have a right to really know who they're voting for. These groups often hide their beliefs, connections, and issues from the wider public, which shape their ideologies and their ability to do what the public elects local government to do, which is take care of our communities. Whether you believe that's by focusing on roads and pipes alone, or if you think councils should have a wider remit. On October 11, the voices of voters will be heard, and it's up to all of us to make sure that those voices are the ones that want to work with communities that they represent, not stop organisations in their tracks because they believe that Klaus Schwab is out to indoctrinate us all and force us into 15-minute cities to eat bugs, or that empathy and understanding of other people around us is a negative trait in our communities. And the only way to do that is to get out and vote.